Hi everyone. You may remember in the last little video we made a nice picture from different coloured papers, Kozo papers. It was really fun. So I'm going to make another. And I might add in another little element. This is another interesting kind of, well, I don't know that it's a paper, but it comes in a sheet. It's very interesting though. You'll find lots of things like that if you start looking in the craft shops, in the scrapbooking shops, in the charity shops. So I really liked it because it's got texture, different colours, but I'm really just going to make it from mostly what's just in front of me on the desk. So I'm going to start, this is what we did last week, and I'm going to take it out of the frame. And I'm just going to use that little template again so that I can figure out what size I need to make it. And I'm going to start with this beautiful Kozo paper I used last week. It's black. I think it's called Stoneflake. And I had taken this out to use last week and disregarded it. So I'm going to use that. That's a beautiful little skeleton leaf, kind of copper coloured. It's lovely. So, but it looks really fabulous against the black. Now I'm going to use Mod Podge this week to see what the difference is. I'm going to pop a little bit on this black now and lay this skeleton leaf on top. I'll use a brush here. I'm not going to use any water because I don't want it to get too sloppy. And I'm just going to figure out where that goes on there and do a rough shape. I'm going to be doing a little bit of stitching later, so I'm not being too terribly careful about gluing everything down. Really doesn't matter anyway. And I'll just pop that one on top, maybe out a little bit more on the edges there. There. So, and I'll just make sure that it's placed centrally there. And can you see how I've ripped the top of that black paper? That's because I just love that look. Yeah, I'll just make sure that that glue is coming all the way through there. Press it down, pop it aside to sort of settle a little bit. And now I'm going to look at what else I'll want. So that ripped edge is calling out for something beautiful underneath it. And this is another scrap from last week. I'm hoping if I use the similar kind of materials, it's going to match in. You know, I could have a double up on my wall of these artworks. So I'm going to use the same paper. That scrap is another Kozo paper where they used citrus leaves as the, you know, the ingredient in it so that you see bits of those leaves. It's lovely. It's got a yellowy tinge. So I'm just cutting a bit that's going to be larger than the cutout in that little matting board. I've got a white sheet of card behind. Nothing too thick. I think it's probably about 170 GSM. And just light card because I'm wanting to stitch later. So I'm putting a little bit of glue there so that I can attach down the things that I want. I'm going to put it central. I can cut it back later to fit in the frame. And I'm just going to pop that down. I'm looking at this lovely stuff here. I'm going to use a little bit. I'm thinking on the sides would be nice. It's just so textural. It adds a little, you know, a little something. I like it. And if I put that in the center and I had that, not much of it's going to show. I mean, by the time I get the matting board on there, probably not going to see much at all. So I'm thinking maybe better off to have it poking over the top of the black and have a little bit that it really show up against the black. So I'll try that. But at the moment, my glue got a little dry, so I'm just doing that. Popping a little bit more down. I used Mod Podge, but you can use, you know, wood glue, craft glue, white glue, something. Or you could also just use, you know, that double-sided tape that you use for scrapbooking. You can get that. All right, so there we are. I'm popping down that really interesting stuff. I really don't know what it is, but it's interesting. over, and you're not really going to see that. You're probably only going to see the bit that's on the black, but I always like to extend the whole picture out so that it will be definitely covered when I put the mat board on. Here I'm looking at some paper that I did in a previous episode, and this is rice paper. We dropped a bit of watercolor on it. We did a little bit of rubbing of crayons on top of a surface that marked lovely little imprints on it, so that when we put a watercolor wash on it, it left these lovely patterns. I'm just thinking this needs a little bit of color, and so I'm looking to see, could I add it in? I'd like the orange. That would help it fit in with the previous picture that we made. So I'm going to just tear a bit off. Torn edges can look so good. They're not all torn, but you know, some things like that. You know, that looks just so organic. That could be a little, you know, a hill or something. Could be a lot of things. Anyway, a little bit more glue along here. Doesn't need very much. I am also going to stitch, so I'll use that and brush it out a little bit, and then just place it where I think it should go. I'll probably grab, yes, the mat board again, just to see how it would line up. Do I want it to be more of that lovely citrus paper up the top showing? Then I'd have to put that orange bit in a little bit higher. And see how I'm putting it over the stem of the leaf? That will also help to trap that leaf in place. So I like that we've added a little bit of an element of an orangey colour. I'm liking it. Try it again in my mat board frame. But I decided a little bit more orange would be nice. I cut out a little circle. I'm thinking this could represent a moon or a sun or something. And I think up there would be nice. But when I look at it, I think it's not as orange as I thought it would be. And really, orange would be better. So I think, okay. I pick it up off the design, put it on a piece of plain paper, grab out my watercolors. You can use a lot of different things to tint paper. But I'm just deciding it needs to have a little bit more orange. So a bit of water on my brush. I put colour on it. And then I think, oh, actually it's a bit too orange now. So I grab a tissue. I scrunched up tissue. And then I dab it. And that takes a lot of the colour off, but leaves a certain amount of colour on. I'm happy with that. This one here, this is a solid colour that has a little bit of glitter in it, or a little bit of shine. I'm just going to use it to go around the edges, so it's really turning into a sort of a sun, isn't it? But it's looking good. I allow that to dry a little bit, and then I can add some glue to it, and I can pop it where I want it to be. I thought that was a good spot that was chosen last time. Now we look like we've got a night sky, a sun, a moon, I don't know, a tree. I like it, whatever it is. I don't really get wound up about thinking it is this or that. It is a combination of colours and textures and stitches and whatever that I particularly like the look of, that I think goes well together. So, yeah, I like the orange. And as I'm waiting for it to dry, I think, okay, what stitching could I do here? Stitching, I think, adds another element. So wherever I do, I'm going to start with a knot off underneath where the mat frame would be. So you're not going to see it. And then I head in from the edge. Now you can just guess where you're going, or you can turn it over each time like this. Or you can mark a few of your next stitches by pricking it from the top where you can see where you're going. And then as you turn it over, you can see the next hole because you've already marked it. Whatever it's going to be. It is just going to be, well, I think I'll actually do quite a few lines. And I'll think, I'll think about it as I go. So I start off with a very ordinary orange, a light orange, a goldy orange. I like to just start off with something that matches in, and see how I've taken it up and into the black. I like that. But here it is on the back. There's my knot way over there. So here, when you finish, you can trap that thread underneath a few other stitches and then a little bit of sticky tape or something on top of that to finish off. I'm going to use the same technique here. I start with a knot way over on the edge that's not going to be seen, travel underneath, and then I'm wanting to do a little bit of stitching here too. I'm thinking I'll just do some sort of vague circles around it and outside of it, and just to sort of like rays of the sun or what have you. And at the moment what I'm doing is I'm thinking it's going to be easier if I mark a few holes first. So, and then when I turn it over, I'll see the next hole that I want to come up at. So sometimes I do that and sometimes I just go for it. But yeah, it's a experiment, and you see what you are best happy with. So I'll do a little bit more stitching here. Each time I'm turning it over. You know, with normal sewing you can just do a few stitches at once, but with paper it's a little more delicate. So one stitch at a time is probably the best idea, from front to back and back to front again. And we're not doing a load of stitching, it's just really just an accent. So I did that orange around that sun kind of shape. And now I'm getting some white. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And on the back, I'm going to do a straight line, you see. So I'm on the back, I'm actually marking a hole where it's going to start from the front. And I'm marking a line. And that'll help me be a little bit more straight, so that when I go through, I can come back in relation to that line. See, that really helps. And I only drew the line very lightly, just in case it might show. So I'll continue using that, going down. And then I decide I quite like it. I brought it in because it helped to blend that the top citrus papers down through the black, because the black is very black, and it really, I don't know, it seemed to add something to add that thick line of white down there. But I wanted it a bit thicker, so I ended up doing 2 lines side by side. And now I look again at this sun and I think I'm still not happy. I want more orange. So I use a darker orange and I bring that in. Doesn't matter. I can just go in between the lines, do a different trajectory around that circle and outside that circle. It's really just adding a little bit more orange to it, a little bit more depth. And don't forget, whenever I'm finished with one, I'll just take it to the back, I'll feed it underneath a few stitches, and I can tape it. And that would be a nice flat way to knot it off, so that you're not going to end up with a little lump under your picture. Now I've grabbed some gold, metallic gold thread. You know, you probably aren't picking that up as well, but under certain lights, it looks fabulous. And I've taken it out into the black as well, and it just really picks up the light. But it's not sort of in your face, bright and blingy. So I'm also going to add some black in here. I decided that it looks a little, it's a big expanse. It's very pretty, that leaf, but I thought a little bit of black, and I can add in something, a suggestion of some branches or something. Something in a nice jet black would be great. So what I'm going to do is up the top here, I'll do it a few times. I know it's hard to see because it's black on black, but I'll explain it as I go. I take a stitch up from underneath and I do a stitch to the right or left. You know, it can be a little higher, a little lower than the original. But what I do is I leave a big loop of thread, and when the needle comes back up again, it's between those two stitches and underneath. And so it gets trapped in the loop. So when you pull it, the loop gets pulled tight and you end up with a lovely little V shape. And then you do one stitch downwards, and that's your branch. I'll give you a closer look to see what I'm talking about here, and then we'll see if we can get it a little better here in the next shot. So up, right, hold that thread out the way, and down again to the right I'm going, and a little bit up. And once I've pushed it in, I'm going to hold that thread so it's got that loop still out. I go to the back, I bring the needle up. See, the loop is still around it, so that when I pull, it's created the V, and then I can go down again. And yeah, so that's like a branch to me. It's like, you know, little V's they are, little Y's I would think actually, because with the stem you can make that long and it'll look like a branch. I thought if I showed you a few times we might pick it up, but it's very hard for you to see. Anyway, that's called fly stitch, but you could also do just a plain stitch. You can just do a running line and another line off it, a running stitch like we have done previously. A lot of things would work. Just experiment and have fun. That's the main thing. But I enjoyed doing that with a little bit of black. I thought that really made it. And as for that orange in the sun, I even put a rusty colour in there. You can see the 3 or 4 knots off to the side where I ended up using a few different colours. Let's have a closer look though. I just wanted you to see how pretty it can be with just a few pieces, a few bits and pieces of scraps, and a bit of glue, a bit of stitch. You don't have to add the stitch. You could do pens, you know, you could have those lovely felt tip pens, something. But look at the two side by side. Can you see how they fit together because they're using the same colours, some of the same papers, but they're both different. And I think this is quite a nice picture. I enjoyed using that skeleton leaf. Look at it. Really does pick up the light. Right, and you might be able to see there the gold thread I used. That too is wonderful in the light. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little project. It was a lot of fun to do. And if you did, don't forget to press like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and we'll find something else to play with next week. Thank you again for watching.